Hi there and welcome to my studio. I've got a great question from one of you guys and I'm gonna answer it now. I love your questions, so always feel free to put them in the comments below, or you can email me at info@themindfulartist.com. My favorite way to answer them is so that the maximum people can benefit from the answer. So I like to do these little quick Q&A videos from time to time. So feel free to shoot me a question if you've got one. Today's question is from Vincent. He says, I'm starting to get into gloss paint now, and I was just wondering if there's any negative effects when using matte varnish on a gloss painting or vice versa. Super interesting question. So negative effects. Okay, so that is perhaps a subjective question. Are we talking about taste-wise? First, I'm into the technical stuff, as you know, if you've watched my channel, so we're gonna just address it from a technical standpoint. There is no negative technical effect on putting a matte varnish on top of a gloss painting or a gloss varnish on top of a matte painting. But negative effects, that could be up to your personal taste. And let's talk about some of the effects of matte versus gloss varnishes on paintings. So first of all, let me refer you, because if you haven't done varnishing before, if you haven't watched my how and why to varnish an acrylic painting, please, before you do anything else, watch that video. I'm gonna link it here so that you can check it out. It's super important to learn about varnishing. I'm always on the side of the artist gets to decide. You don't have to varnish a painting. No one said you had to varnish a painting, but if you're interested in the longevity of your painting, varnish is a great way to address that. It will help seal the painting from dust and pollutants getting trapped in the sort of pores of acrylic. Acrylic has sort of a porous nature when it's dry, so things can get caught in there. And so I go into much more detail in that varnishing video talking about how and why. So check that out. So back to the taste question, sort of aesthetic question, matte versus gloss. So when you think of old master paintings, think of like Velázquez or Rembrandt or Frans Hals or Artemisia Gentileschi. Those people in those days were using oil paint, obviously, and they were using Damar Varnish, which is a resin-based varnish. I did learn from the conservation department at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. that Damar Varnish is not a good choice because it does crack and yellow. And you'll see when you go to museums and you look at those paintings, paintings that haven't had conservation will often have very fine cracks all over them. It doesn't necessarily affect it from far away, but when you're up close, you really do notice it. And I'm sure the painters themselves would have preferred not to have those cracks happen. Anyway, I digress. So let's get into acrylic painting. The advantages of acrylic varnishes and the contemporary varnishes for oil painting is that when you're using these contemporary products that were developed not to crack, you are going to have a long-lasting surface to your painting that won't degrade over time and it won't yellow. Okay, so that's number one. But I was talking about old master paintings because you'll notice they are quite glossy, and Damar Varnish is very glossy. You'd mix it with linseed oil in different proportions. People had different recipes. You can research that in some of the different books like Ralph Mayer's Handbook for Artists. Anyway, oh my God, I'm getting so off track, you guys. Okay. I got off track. I'm gonna get back on track to gloss versus matte. So in the old master paintings that you may have seen in museums, you will notice they are quite glossy. The effect of gloss on color, especially dark colors, is to give them depth and maybe a little touch of luminosity or brilliance. When you have matte over, say, darker colors like black or deep blues, they tend to look more on the surface. So you will have an effect of less depth and more flatness. But that's not to say that that's a bad effect. On a lot of paintings, the subtlety of a matte finish is what an artist is going after. They don't want that kind of like blingy, in-your-face glossiness. They want sort of a muted palette or a muted sense of surface. Perhaps they're focusing more on texture. Think of someone like Dubuffet or Paul Klee. Those paintings had a lot of texture and a lot of surface interest, and gloss may in some cases detract from that. Again, this is all a very personal choice. There's not a right or wrong. The way I would suggest you address this is make sure you're looking at a lot of paintings, as many as you can. So that could be in your local galleries, and especially if you've had access to some museums, paintings that have kind of stood the test of time and that are, you know, there's all kinds of painting, and I don't like to make value judgments very much. I feel like there's a place for everything in this world. But when you do go to a museum, those are paintings that many people have agreed are really fine works of art, and often you will feel it yourself. But it's always up to you. You are the artist. You get to decide what appeals to you. And part of your process as developing as an artist is learning to discern, learning your own discernment, your own sense of taste. So just as if you were a chef, in the beginning you may copy other chefs, and then over time you develop your own palette of flavors, your own palette of ingredients and things that you like to use that make your cooking unique. Same with a painter or artist of any stripe. You will develop your own techniques and treasure that. Treasure who you are and your voice. Don't be looking outside. Look outside to learn, but then always bring it back to yourself. What do you like? What appeals to you? Don't let anyone else tell you what is right or wrong in these questions. Again, I will always give you technical answers, but there are many artists who have completely ignored technical expertise. Someone like Jackson Pollock, you know, who just used, you know, enamel paint that cracks, and those paintings are falling apart, and, you know, big, huge conservation projects. But those paintings really impacted the development of painting. Whether you like them or not is irrelevant, and whether anyone else likes your work or not is irrelevant. So I got a little off topic here, Vincent, and the rest of you who have this question, because a lot of this boils, it doesn't burn down, it boils down to personal taste. And make sure you cultivate that yourself. Learn as much as you can about your materials, but decide, do you like matte or do you like gloss? Or do you want some passages matte and some passages gloss? Again, I addressed that in my varnishing video, so please check it out. You don't have to do a coat across the whole thing. You can use frisket or masking or hand painting in certain areas if you like, to get a variation in gloss finish. So I hope that answered your question, and anyone else who has this question, please ask more below. If I didn't elaborate or I didn't address something, I want to know about it. Let me know, do you use varnish on your paintings? And if so, have you tried both matte and gloss? Have you sampled them on different scrap paintings so you can kind of learn? Have you looked at paintings in museums and learned from the finish on those paintings what you like? I'm thinking Corot, one of the early kind of, I guess, proto-impressionists, maybe historians would call him. His paintings had a very kind of matte surface quality, and a lot of oil paint can. Oil paint doesn't necessarily end up glossy, and same thing with acrylics. You can go the range, the gamut from matte all the way to gloss and satin and every sheen in between. So happy painting, my friends, and I'll see you on the next video.